Hey guys, this is Zach. I'm here with Abhijit Iyer-Mitra, and I'm here with Omkar Singh, who's in Cambridge, and Abhijit is in Delhi. We're here to discuss the India-Chinese conflict, particularized to Galwan, and also maybe have more of a meta discussion about India's role in the world. I'm first going to go to you, Abhijit, and ask you, just give a very quick recap of your thoughts on where we are vis-a-vis with China and India, who's won, who's lost, and what do you see for both powers going forward?
So we're exactly where we were about 50, 60, 70 years back. Nowhere, no determination on the border. The good thing is we're building up infrastructure. I don't know how much longer we will continue to build that infrastructure. Tactical Galwan was a tactical victory for sure, even though it doesn't seem like it at the face of it when we've lost 20 troops and they're not advertising how many troops they lost. But what I worry about is this is just the beginning. This isn't the end. The de-escalation is going to take 6, maybe even 8 months. And my fear is the Chinese aren't going to let this go. And that worries me. So it may have been a tactical victory, but I don't want it turning out to be a Doklam again, where we scored a tactical victory, but a strategic failure because Bhutan pulled the rug from under our feet. And, we went in there to defend Bhutanese interests and they didn't want us defending their interests. So, it was kind of a sort of an oblique strike. I don't want that happening this time. I fear it might happen this time.
Oh, okay. And from an Indian strategic perspective, is this confrontation with China actually welcome? Or is this just, in a way, this could be something that could advance Indian interests? And then Omkar, I'll come to you as well to talk about
I see 2 big positives in this. Number one is the fact that we've finally woken up to the need to build infrastructure in our borders, because infrastructure equals control, right? Possession is 9/10 of the law. All these guys for the last 30, 40 years, they were saying patrols. Patrols are not control. Patrols don't mark territory. It's more like an animal going there and, peeing and marking its territory like a tiger in the forest. That doesn't mean it controls the forest. It does not. The second, so we've woken up to that, and the Chinese have noticed it and they've tried to stop us, and I think they've failed. So that's good thing number one. Good thing number two is we drew a line at water. The moment they blocked the Galwan River, because the consequences for a lower riparian state like India that is fed with Tibetan glacial waters, almost the whole of the northern Indo-Gangetic plains depends on Tibetan glacial flow coming in. We went in there to destroy a dam. I don't think the operation succeeded, but strategically it succeeded because the Chinese opened up the waters almost immediately. So we've sent a message to them saying, thus far, but no further. And in those 2 respects, I think, we've done pretty damn well.
Okay, so that's quite usually if you look at social media, it says that this might be a bit of a tactical setback for India. Everyone has a different perspective. Just on the water thing that I wanted to touch on a bit. So is the Galwan River itself, is it strategically very important in terms of the water, or is this much more a symbolic act? Like when they were building this dam, does it feed into a major river of sorts, like say in India and Pakistan, there's the Indus and the Punjab and the 5 rivers?
So it isn't strategically important in terms of water. What it's important is in terms of intelligence and in terms of legal precedent. Intelligence, why? Because they told us for the last 20 years while they were building dams in Tibet that these are run-of-the-mill dams. They're not water diversion dams. They are not water blockage dams. And we now know that these dams have the ability to block water, something we were told had not happened. So in terms of intelligence, we now know that all these dams are now a security threat for us, okay? And at a time, if hostilities commence, we will have to start bombing them just to protect ourselves. Number 2 is in terms of legality. Because, if you don't protest an upper riparian country blocking one, then the question keeps getting raised, why didn't you protest? Why didn't you protest when they start blocking the rest? We've stood our ground. That in legal terms, that's a very, very, very important thing. We've basically held the Chinese to their promise that they're not going to block. And this is important because all the way from the Indus right up to Southeast Asia, to Mekong, right, we've shown there are some things that are simply not going to be negotiable. The Galwan by itself, the water flow is negligible. The Shyok can manage just fine without the Galwan. If the Galwan dries up, it wasn't going to be anything big. The thing was the legal precedent that it set. And let's face it, nobody's going to come to our help if they start blocking waters. We could block waters further down to, say, Bangladesh and Pakistan to punish China, but that really won't have helped because, I mean, what's the point of starving them when we ourselves are going to starve, sort of thing. The one river that probably didn't matter was the Brahmaputra because the water catchment, 98% of the water catchment of the Brahmaputra happens on the Indian side. The Indian side is the rainward side, the Tibet side is the leeward side. But there, the late summer water flows from the late glacial melts. They're very important in recharging the aquifers, which are still very important for agriculture during the winter.
So fascinating. So much detail about, I mean, the water dynamics, because of course we know about India and Pakistan, and obviously China is the ultimate, I mean, Tibet is the ultimate source. So I can see where we are. But I understand from Omkar as well that the troops leaves have been cancelled basically. So is India gearing, this is an open question to both of you, but is India gearing up for further hostilities, or are we looking to de-escalation? Where are we looking over the next few days, weeks, or months in the shorter timeline? I mean, not that anyone can read the mind, can be a predictor or astrologer, but just where does it look like it's going?
Yeah, can I come in?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so it's as a matter of de-escalation is considered, I think both the countries are superpowers and they have huge things to be contributed in the world. And what I feel is that there should be a matter where they should come to a point of de-escalation. I think it is vested interest for both the countries to come in. As far as time is considered, they're not sure how much time it's going to take, but India is completely ready in terms of all the three defense forces. They are ready in Navy, Air Force, and military. We can see the borders of India from north is completely tightened up, and our men are completely standing in front of Chinese troops and sending them back in all the possible ways. And our ministry, especially the government, is completely ready to support the troops in whatever the possible they can. And you can see, if you see the Punjab and all other northern parts, even the coordinate department, the artilleries have been sent to the borders. It shows a clear sign from the Indian government and Indian perspective that India is going to be completely ready for any further standoff China is going to take.
What do you think about that?
India is ready the same way Poland was ready in 1939 or 1940.
Oh God!
Where we've got all our troops amassed on the border, we've got all our planes ready, we've cancelled all leave, we've got the Air Force in the skies and the Navy out in the seas, and we're going to get crushed by the Luftwaffe. We're going to get crushed by the Wehrmacht. We're going to get crushed by the Kriegsmarine. That's where we are at the moment, okay? Just substitute Kriegsmarine, Luftwaffe, and Wehrmacht with the PLA, the PLAAF, and the PLAN, People's Liberation Army Navy, People's Liberation Army, People's Liberation Army Air Force. And that's the situation you have. I really don't want to see a siege of Warsaw turning out into be a siege of Delhi. Look, we have lots of problems within the military. Lack of synchronization, lack of, we don't do military exercises and training. We do ballets where everybody knows their role and they just carry out their role and reconfirm pre-existing biases and things like that. We don't sack people for a lack of, for accountability issues and things like that. We don't have any records of how they performed, so on and so forth. So weapons problems, human resource problems, management problems, all of that, it's all going to come home to roost. So unfortunately, where it's very, very different from 1962, but it's also very, very similar to 1962.
But then just to interject there, okay, one is I take the point of 1962, Nehru's India being very different to the 2020 Modi's India, but also India has been fighting at some times an active conflict, but at other times a low-level conflict with Pakistan. So, and it's also used to mountain warfare, whereas the PLA, I mean, this is something that I read across, so it'd be good to also get some clarity on that. China hasn't really fought any conflicts apart from India, maybe proxy wars in Korea or Vietnam, but to my knowledge, India has actually had a lot of formidable fighting experience.
Yeah, look, China has much greater pain tolerance. You know, the Communist Party killed off 7 times the number of Chinese citizens than the Japanese Imperial Army did. Number one. Number two, they're weakened by the fact that Xi Jinping has been toying around with all these military commands for a very long time now. He's been posting people left, right, and center. They don't even know what their roles are. They will be quite clueless, and they will lack fighting experience. But, and this is a big but, they are still industrially far ahead of us. They are logistically far superior to us. Their numerical advantage is far, far, far greater than ours. You know, one Type 52D destroyer, just one destroyer of theirs, has more vertical launch systems, which means more missiles, than our entire Western fleet put together. Right? Those are not good odds.
And how many destroyers do they have, just so I can understand?
They have about 3 so far, 4 so far. So those are really not odds that you want to take on at the moment, right? I would have been more confident had, you know, we had a better military planning process and so on and so forth. We don't. We're stuck with what we have. We have to make the best of what we have. And the Chinese military may not do very well, but they can throw a lot more numbers at you consistently without fear of loss, without any form of logistics breakage in the rear. Remember, our logistics lines are much closer to the front. Our supply factories are much closer to the front than theirs are. They've literally got, like the Soviet Union had the east of the Urals, where all the industrial manufacturing was moved so that German bombers couldn't target it. They've got east of the Tibet Plateau, where we've got to go a very, very, very long way to target their supply.
And that's basically, I would imagine it's impossible for the Indian army to go east of Tibet. That I would give as an example, that I don't think that strategic depth is there. But I don't think also, in some ways, is that really a war that's worth for India and China to fight over a small strip of land? Like, you know, won't the Chinese just want to back down? Because
so here's the thing. We think that it's a small strip of land. Like Nehru said, not even a blade of grass grows out there. But the Chinese think it's worth enough fighting for and destroying your relations with the country for it. So, you know, the lack of a cost-benefit analysis isn't the Indian one. It's the lack of a of a Chinese cost-benefit analysis, really.
Omkar, you had raised your hand.
Yeah. So I'd just like to say that the India of 1962, where the manufacturing companies were shutting down, the India of 2020, where all the 3 defense forces are getting ready, at least we are not showing the signs of the previous whatever happened. At least we are showing the sign of moving ahead, of fighting. And as far as human resource in military is considered, if you have heard the story of Jashwant Singh during 1962 war, there was a memorial in Arunachal Pradesh as well. It shows a great sign that one soldier is sufficient enough. I know I'm talking in terms of emotionally, but still, we are quite ready, I feel, allowing defense budget increment and also getting ready in all the sources. India is now ready right now in fighting in all the terms like COVID, Pakistan, China, as much as possible, and internal idiocy of the opponent governments they're fighting on. Now, whatever the government right now, BJP is doing in controlling whatever the standoff going on in terms of border-related issues, I think it is accurately planned and it is going very well. I understand that economy of China has always been, the moment they get unstable, and they have the capacity to get back stable enough in a very quiet span. So it happened in 2014, 2015, I guess. It happened when the government, or when the economy of China was completely devastated, and finally just took up in a few months. So it shows that economy is quite sufficient enough of Chinese economy, but Indian economy is completely stable. We have seen in the past that the economy of China going drastically down and surprisingly coming up. So we have seen a stable economy India is in terms of China. And if India and China matters is not going to de-escalate, they're both going to face a huge loss. And India is also an upcoming superpower, nevertheless, compared to China, I feel.
We'll get to the superpower, but if you want to, Abhijit.
Yeah, look, India is not becoming a superpower, not in my lifetime, not in anybody's lifetime in this podcast. But
what I feel, it is on the verge of becoming a superpower. It is not in the sense that if I can't predict the future, no one can predict the future. No one thought India will be the center of whole world once upon a time. Now you see how India is dealing with other related issues as well. So it is completely. No one has ever thought a virus can put every human being inside a four door and inside a four wall. Never thought someone, but it happened.
Well,
so we can't say that it's not in the verge of becoming a superpower, at least.
Yeah. Look, a lot of people have thought viruses are going to be shut down society. There's been lots of doomsday predictions about it. It's just that we thought it was impossible. Getting back to this economy thing, remember the economy has been in doldrums for quite a while now. The downturn started sometime in 2014, 2013 even it had started off. And you had the first big blow, which was demonetization. Then you had the second big blow, which was a badly botched GST, which technically should have helped the economy quite a bit. The third blow now is COVID. Okay, because COVID is, I've seen it. I've seen so many medium and small and micro sector industries just shut down because they've been unable to cope. And all of this was before COVID. Now with COVID, we're looking at, I honestly don't even want to go down where we're going after COVID. You will see China bounce back a lot quicker. They already have. They've already got their factories running and things like that. They're sequencing their lockouts because, there's a second wave going on in Beijing at the moment, Beijing and Shanghai. Economically way ahead of us, they'll recover much quicker than us. We've got nothing to really recover to because we've pretty much destroyed our economy doing socialism for the last 15, 16 years. I won't be surprised if at the end of COVID, we're back 15, 16 years to where Rajput left.
Ouch. This is, wow. Okay. This is.
No, what I feel, what he was talking about before the demonetization, GST has created a great impact on the SMEs. What I would like to say is that in the year 2017, when I just started my company in the sector of SMEs, I got the opportunity. I got a help from the government who helped me literally to grow my business, and I employed 32 people there in India. So I think GST was literally helpful for me in growing. So I have never seen. I was in a quite long time in the business sector, but I haven't seen any company shutting down. But yes, the demonetization had a negative impact on the economy. GST was not, but yeah, I think COVID will be throwing every Indian back into the economy. It doesn't matter; it's only India.
But I just wanted to also clarify some points. I mean, I've been the back and forth is very, very interesting as well, and I think it's always the case. And I don't know if you know it, Abhijit, but I'm actually half Pakistani and half Iranian. But I try to be as neutral as I can in everything, or be as dispassionate. But what I wanted to really sort of tease on a bit is that if it's not like, okay, let's say China lays siege to Delhi, and let's just say there's even a two-wave attack to, let's say there's a two-wave attack from China, Pakistan, but is it really in the interests of these powers to shake up the status quo and to create such an instability? I can understand maybe from the perspective of, say, Pakistan, where India and Pakistan are like, eternal sworn enemies, but of course, then you'd be triggering a domino effect, right? It's not just going to be a China-India escalation. Then you would have other countries that would see Delhi being sieged as an example, and then, knocking on China's door and saying, come on, mate, India does have some strategic alliances de facto, like America or the West. What would you say to that?
The main thing, not going to get to a siege of Delhi. I was just using the
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm also being hyperbolic.
Purely as a metaphor, because there is nuclear deterrence at play. There's nuclear deterrence between India and China. There's nuclear deterrence between India and Pakistan. And that, of course, is also what prevents our allies from coming and helping us. So America can at best do what America did in 1971, which is to sail the fleet of Shanghai and threaten China so that it diverts some resources China's way. Look, this is not going to blow up into a full-scale war. It's going to be a limited border conflict. Maybe say another 30, 40, 50 people will die on either side, but that's about it. It's not the kind of apocalyptic conflict that you're going to see.
But you're talking more about like loss of face, where India, if it suffers an international loss of face, this could have a cascade effect in diplomatic relations and so on. Are we talking about that sort of the scale? Because I did a podcast in February with a Cambridge scientist on COVID, and I was assured on that podcast that COVID was well on its way out. And of course, 3 months or 4 months later, my entire life and all of our lives have been upended by COVID. So never say never. So, I'm also a bit skeptical.
So you know what, who was the man who came up with center of gravity? I forget now, the Prussian officer. He said on war, who wrote on war?
Clausewitz?
Clausewitz, yeah, that's it, Clausewitz. He said, the first thing that goes out of the window are plans once the war starts, once the shooting starts. It's a bit like that. We can have all these plans for wars. We don't know how they play out. But basically what I see in this case happening is it'll be a loss, not a face. I don't care about a loss of face because I think it was Cardinal Richelieu who said this, that, revenge is a luxury that statesmen can't afford. And I agree with that. Just like face isn't a luxury that countries can afford. You achieve results. If you lose face, you lose face. Face isn't something we should be worried about, even though Asians worry about it a bit too much. My worry really here is if the Chinese continue thrashing you and you keep insisting on non-alignment, the seriousness with which the West takes you will reduce drastically. Because the last time, nobody took us seriously because after 62, we were still talking non-alignment. And they're like, look, you guys are mad. You're just these idealistic little pricks who have no sense of their own self-interest. And that same stigma is going to attach to you. Because after that, Nehru came to be known as woolly-headed. I'm hoping this government doesn't go down that path and be known to future generations as being woolly-headed. But there's a good logic for us to not go, to remain non-aligned, and that is primarily to keep Russia away from China. If we join with America, Russia goes directly into China's arms, which is something we want to stop. Do we have the diplomatic finesse, the institutional capability to make America understand that? I doubt that very much. I've never seen any proof of Indian diplomatic finesse. It didn't exist in 1962, despite having allegedly fantastic diplomats. It still doesn't exist because in India, unfortunately, when you say somebody's a great diplomat, it invariably means he speaks English very good, his rhetoric is very good, and he's able to denounce every imperialist capitalist power from 12,000 kilometers away, but make absolutely no sense.
Omkar, I see you. Are you itching to respond, or should we?
No, I was just thinking about how we are talking about the face of like in international terms. I think China, I think they're not much bothered about their image because they're playing on a separate league. The things after the COVID, they're doing with their neighboring countries, like what happened in the Southern Sea and the Japan, and now with India. I think they will be completely smashed in international grounds, I feel, and India has got a good support as well.
No, I mean obviously we're wading into the realm of like hypothetical scenarios, and I think that this would be a good segue right now into like the more sort of meta analysis of where we see, say, taking a 10-year, 20-year perspective if we are afforded that 10 year, 20 years and we don't all plunge. But we are seeing the decline of America as the unilateral hyperpower. And I mean, of course, America is still a very prominent power. It's going to be the dominating influence out for the next 20 or 30 years. But we probably have reached that inflection point whereby America cannot dictate to the rest of the world and have its fingers in every pie. Maybe that's where you're seeing the rise of stronger powers. And even if we don't see India as a superpower, it's no doubt that India will be a great power. And probably in the 19th century, we had 19th century Europe with many different states like Prussia, France, Britain, the Holy Roman Empire, Russia as well. And now in the same way, it's replicating in the Asian context of Russia, China, India, and Saudi Arabia, to a less extent, Pakistan, Turkey, Iran. So if India, I think to some extent, Abhijit, what I would say is that, but don't you see that India is a great jugaad nation, like in the sense that can't India just jugaad the next decade or so, like at least be able to make those leaps? It doesn't, I saw your not death of a superpower, your superpower video, but then of course, to replicate those institutions, it's going to take another 50, 100 years. But then can't India make those strategic, brilliant leaps under amazing leadership to offset its weaknesses? Do you not think that Modi might have done some of that in the last few years? Or
no, I don't see any promise in the current government. I don't see any promise in any political leader in India at the moment. I don't think there's any understanding of the macro problems that India faces. Now, in order to make those macro leaps that you're talking about, you first need a clear analysis of the problems. The Chinese are very good at analyzing problems, but they're not very good at solving those problems. They come with single-handed measures, which then leave more consequences by the wayside, which they're not able to deal with. With India, we don't even do a good self-analysis. To date, why is it that with about a $70 billion defense budget, you still don't produce one worthwhile piece of domestic equipment? Okay, it's because we keep fooling ourselves. We keep fooling ourselves, telling us that, oh, it's just around the corner. It's the foreign defense lobbies that destroyed our indigenization efforts. It's none of that. You didn't create economies of scale. Your medium, small, and micro segment are so weak. They have no industrial diversity or depth to be able to manufacture in international, norms within international these weapon subsystems within India to a globally competitive norm. It's Indian policy is as bizarre as Alice in Wonderland. It's a perpetual drug-induced haze of absurdities.
But so is there any hope at all? Like, I mean, I'm actually kidding. I just want to know, is there any hope at all? Then what is, like, where if it's all doom and gloom, we may as well just, give up. So
me, it's all doom and gloom. But I'm a professional pessimist. Don't go by me. Let's hear Omkar on this, because he's a lot more optimistic than I am. I see no hope. There is no silver lining at the end of the tunnel for me. There is no silver cloud. There is no rainbow. There is nothing. All I see is doom and gloom. But Omkar, you take it away.
Yeah. I see a positivity coming ahead, and when you're talking about how India is not good enough in analyzing stuff, I think you can see how the Western world has handled the COVID pandemic and how the Indian has handled, how much quickly government has took steps in just tackling with this pandemic. So we are quite good enough in this one. And
sorry, Omkar, just to interrupt you. Are you saying that the Indian government has done a good job in handling the COVID pandemic? Right?
No. What I'm saying is India is good in analyzing. It's like Indian government is quite good in analyzing this stuff. So I just want to make that point. It's not about the COVID or pandemic. So your question was superpower, optimism on superpower, right? So see, as far as I have seen Indian economy since 2014, there are certain things like change the economy to go down, and then suddenly we have also seen how the government is dealing with international. We have seen with how the government is especially dealing with FIIs. There has been completely great increment in it. How the foreign investments government is able to attract, and able to divert it to in country, giving a boost to Make in India projects. So I think India is gonna be a superpower. Yeah, obviously this was a topic of debate in the National Youth Parliament. Coincidentally, in 2019, when it was asked that is India going to be a superpower in coming times? So I defended saying yes. Yeah, I was optimistic that time. So I said yes, India will be a superpower, not now. See, and it is also I don't feel it's right to speak on data which is available. The moment we get into the certain standoff between India and China, we start speaking on the data which is available, the number of tanks, soldier, human resource, and all the stuff we have. But it is also mandatory to look how India is tackling and how the history of India since 1947, dealing with all the neighboring countries and how it has been till now. I feel it is not accurate enough to speak on particular data and strategize on that basis.
Look, for me, data is everything. And the problem with India is we don't collect data. At my old job in ORF, the Observer Research Foundation, we purchased 30 different data banks from 30 different ministries of India. They had collected the data going up to about 500,000 families. 500,000 families, if you average about 5 persons per family, would be about 2.5 million families. They didn't even know what to do with the data. They never collated the data. It was just left to rot, and each of the 30 ministries had collated it in completely different codes, in completely different ways, and they didn't know what to do with it, and they dumped it on us. We got it for less than 10,000 rupees. Imagine that kind of...
Just to...
1 second, let me finish. This is 30 departments of government, 2.5 million people. There is no poll, no data that is that extensive anywhere in the world. And it was never used by the government. Indian policy has never been data-driven. And this is highly problematic. We don't analyze data, we don't collect data, we don't collate data, we don't synchronize data. It's highly, highly, highly problematic. And that presents a lot of problems. Second point that Omkar raised, COVID. The COVID response was good to begin with when the lockdown was announced, not the method of the lockdown, but rather the decision to do a lockdown. It went south the moment the Tablighi Jamaat guys started off, and then it went even more south when the migrant problem, when the migrants wanted to go home and things like that, which should have been thought of in the very first place. It took us how many months to recalibrate, and right now our COVID figures are going through the roof all over again. So we got the worst of lockdown, and now we're getting the worst of herd immunization. This is how Indian policy is made. Okay, the standard thing about Indian policy is nobody thinks through the second and third order effects. They only think through the first order effects. These are, the chatak, the surprise element of it, the sort of the magician saying abracadabra and pulling the rabbit out of the hat. The preparation that goes into it is never thought about. It's a very tacky way of making policy. And when you come out and you ask these bureaucrats questions, you can just tell from the shallow knowledge that they have, because they've not been in the department for more than 3 to 4 years. They keep shifting. Your finance secretary for a long time was a man who had a PhD in yoga. How the hell does that work? I mean, it's a joke. I've been to circuses that are, less funny than this joke. This is actually a sad, pathetic, the Indian government is a sad, pathetic joke, because it's
but
trying...
isn't it the best of the worst? Isn't it the best of the worst on option right now?
Well, look, democracy can still be better managed. Democracy doesn't imply incompetence. Democracy doesn't imply a celebration of mediocrity and incompetence. Democracy is the best system we have, but celebrating third-ratedness in the name of democracy isn't my idea of democracy.
We seem to be at a distinct impasse. I just also wanted to ask this question, maybe just to shift the conversation a bit, because obviously we have two different perspectives, and I can kind of see both perspectives. One is, don't mistake the trees for the forest. The other one is, let's look at the health of each individual tree and see what exactly is going on. So I can see that.
Just very, very quick point I wanted to add in terms of how India will cope with COVID. Don't worry, we'll cope with it just fine, because the Indian healthcare system is not a quality healthcare system, it is a quantity healthcare system. So you can bombard it with numbers, it will still absorb it. All right. So it's not going to be the kind of doomsday breakdown that you're seeing in Italy and saw in Italy or possibly in Britain now, but it's not going to be nice. Remember, we lose between 200,000 to 400,000 people every year to TB, right? Every single year. And it doesn't cause the kind of economic disruption that this one has. So, yeah.
Fascinating. No, I mean, of course, I think that, where I mean, obviously I can see that there are formidable challenges. In some ways, what I think with India and what I see with social media, there's always this benchmarking that India is going to follow in the footsteps of China. But then there's always this idea that as long as India is better than, say, where Pakistan is, which is a literal basket case in many cases, and it's turned into a, sort of like settled Muslim province of China. So China has Xinjiang and China has Pakistan, and Pakistan is obviously the more settled province of China. But what should India then look to as a model for which country it can aspire to become, to emulate, to copy, to sort of like imitate, if it's going to pursue some sort of fast track development? Or is this just a 100-year cycle we have to wait out?
It's not going to happen. One of the reasons the West fantasized about India is they thought that India was going to industrialize like South Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, and all of these countries did. Remember, with all those countries, including America, Britain, France, all of them, America and Britain were in a sense democracies, but they were tightly controlled democracies, kind of like South Africa, right? Because the suffrage was very, very limited to very, very few people, and it was imperfect. India did representation before it built up institutions. All these other countries built up institutions before they gave representation. We're starting bottom up. We've made the mistake of giving everybody representation, and we're paying the price for it.
But isn't that the genius of Indian democracy?
It's the genius of being Indian, for sure. Is it going to be long lasting? Is it going to bring benefits to the people of India? That is the big question. Because remember, even in Pakistan, if you look at it, you want to look at the counterexample. Ayub Khan saw that problem. So he wanted to build up Pakistan, and he introduced this basic democracy thing where only 100,000 people could vote and everybody else had to shut up kind of thing. It worked fine, but look at where Pakistan is today. So there's the issue in India. You can applaud it for being a democracy, but democracy for what? It is an imperfect democracy. For about 10% of the population, it's almost a perfect democracy. You can say what you want and get away with it. I didn't get away with it, as I found out. I spent 43 days in jail figuring that one out. But for the remaining 90% of the population, life is hell, because the state has never acquired the monopoly on violence, right? For everybody else, it's a violent society. You don't know what's going to happen to you. It's not violent in terms of large-scale riots and things like that. It's more violent in terms of your day-to-day brutish existence, your sort of constant harassment by someone or the other, the judicial pendency and things like that, the lack of a proper police force. We're one of the most under-policed countries in the world, a lack of reporting on crime. So, there's a lot of unseen violence that happens in India. I mean, we can go about celebrating it. I'm happy to romanticize India for you if that's what you want, but India is not the hunky-dory picture that everybody presents it to be.
But the fact that you have...
I've led a hunky-dory life. I've led a very, very hunky-dory life, including in jail where I was given VIP treatment. But then, yesterday, 2 people who opened their shop for just 15 minutes more than it should have been open during COVID shutdown in my state of Tamil Nadu were beaten so badly. Their skulls had been smashed, their chests had been smashed, their knees had been smashed. Their bodies were unrecognizable. Okay, I'm what Graham Greene called the untouchable classes. Nobody can really touch me. Even if they send me to jail, they'll give me VIP treatment. Those two went so lucky. That's ordinary India. I'm privileged India. Okay, that's the real India. This isn't the real India. So, we can have these over glamorized, beautifully romantic versions of India. It is simply not true. The reality of India is something quite different. It's not very nice. The thing is, it's not exactly what the West's preferred interpreters of India want you to see. People like Rana Ayub or, who are those other people, whoever writes in the Washington Times and New York Post, they seem to know how to pick and choose the biggest Mahamurk. I don't know what the translation of Mahamurk is. Clown, jester, king jester, a court jester, who try to give you a completely Western juxtaposition of things that don't work. It's far worse than what they say, but what they say is just complete nonsense.
What do you mean by, sorry, just very quickly, what do you mean by why, just clarify, why is it what they say is complete nonsense if it pretty much chimes the same doom and gloom story? So why? I'm just trying to get.
Because they don't understand the roots of what they're saying. They're simply describing the symptoms. Godhra, what happened in Godhra, the riots in Godhra, weren't a crime of commission, they were a crime of omission. Right? When you look at it as a crime of omission, the entire legal approach to it changes. But because these people wanted to peddle a crime of commission story, basically got nothing out of it. The legal reforms that should have happened, the police reforms that should have happened, the law and order reforms that should have happened, none of it happened. Right? State capacity was not fixed. Can you still have riots like that? Of course you can. Because there's been no institutionally corrective action that's been taken.
But sorry to interrupt you, but I feel like the fact that India has this, let 1,000 flowers bloom, let 1,000 schools of thought flourish, and it's actually been there for pretty much uninterrupted since 1947. However imperfect the ideal may have been, and you guys had emergency as well, but then to some extent, India's accomplishments and achievements, it does have a je ne sais quoi quality. And I'm not saying this in a romanticized way that I'm exotifying India. Yes, I agree. I've seen your lectures on malnutrition, the islanding that you talked about as well, the overrepresentation of rural versus urban. I paid close attention and I thought, you are a realist, but to some extent, you can't India has a magic at the end of the day, which I think, should also be somewhat celebrated.
It is magical. Look, I love India in spite of all its flaws. The problem is people are trying to put makeup on something quite ugly. I love India for all its warts, its bumps, its bad haircut, its cheap, nasty lipstick, its terrible eye shade that ends up clumping your eyelashes, bad perfume that evaporates in like 30 seconds. I love it in spite of all of that. I don't need to romanticize India to love it. My issue is when we get into, for me, it has always been magical, right? For me, my emotional connect will always be to India. I am never emotionally connected to any other state. Even though I don't believe in the idea of a nation state, I still choke up when I hear the national anthem. If anybody attacks my country abroad, I will attack my country, but nobody else bloody well attack it, because then I will shove a pineapple where the sun don't shine. But we can't live in perpetual self-delusion like this. We're in shit, we've got to pick ourselves out of the shit, and we need to go take a shower.
And do you think, Omkar, before I give you a chance, and do you think are we in an urgency right now, or can we just stumble along as we have for the last 70 years?
We can't stumble along. The quantum of our problems has become so great, they need urgent action now. It is already possibly quite late. I fear it is, but the rapidity and speed with which action is required is getting worse and worse because the problems they're compounding.
Omkar, if you want to add anything. Are you just in a general state of shock?
Yeah, hopefully my internet is stable. Is my internet
Yeah, yeah, you're
stable?
fine.
Am I audible now?
Yeah, it's fine. You're
I don't know why your voice is breaking. So, okay. Okay, thank God I got the opportunity of speaking at least now. So I was trying to interrupt you in between because I was speaking on the data of not internal one but the comparison data for China and India in terms of arms and nominations. Okay, so your question was, Mr. Zach, your question was saying that is India should India copy any Western or idealize any other country for becoming a superpower? I think India has got its own factors to deal with. So India, I think, should have their own path and own way of becoming and reaching to the goal of becoming a superpower. There is also a need for defining what superpower means. It is not only in terms of becoming defensively powerful or having a good governance, but it's a very broader term which we have to discuss on. And he was as far as police, he was talking about, Mr. Abhijit was talking about police system and the defense system, also criticizing and how the law of police work. So I think there's a quite urgency to change the police laws, which is still working on the British rule of 1882, which you can just see that there is an urgency for changing it because it is the kind of mindset that the training it's going on and they are getting imbibed with, and it's very important for them to change because we are not running on the Constitution of India, but we are running on the Constitution which is drafted in terms otherwise by the British or by the other countries or certain factors. So these are the terms which is taking India into a negative shades. And moreover, what I feel, India has seen a huge population crowd, a religious indifference exist. So this stuff make India to get into the superpower, what actually other people they feel they can be. And moreover, criticize if I being loving my nation and just pointing out each and everything which I don't like about it and to prove myself by standing for the national anthem, I feel it is just a sanctimonious patriotism.
Yeah, but I mean, I'll define Abhijit as the loyal opposition, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I'm loving this conversation what I'm having right now.
Because I think it's quite honest, and I think, I mean, I actually, with respect, I think that obviously, Abhijit, I do agree with you that you are a professional pessimist, and I think, I mean, I hope that you're wrong. I hope that you're wrong.
I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I hope I am bloody wrong. I trust me, I would be the happiest if I came back on your podcast, if there's something called a podcast in 20 years' time, and Zachary and Omkar were here having a good laugh saying, Abhijit, you're the biggest moron we ever had the misfortune of having on our podcast. Okay? Trust me, nothing would make me happier. My fear is I'm right.
It's not about factually speaking or being honest, but it's more about perspective, what we look into.
Yeah. And I think I come from a family of auditors, you see, so we always look for the worst and then try to correct it.
But then, okay, I'll give you as an example, right? And I maybe this segues quite well with our last, Omkar's very distant relative, Sushant Singh Rajput. No, I'm just saying, but to take the example of Bollywood, right? And I mean, I also want to wrap up, but this is a really important point that Bollywood had no real global standing. There was nothing going for India to have a world-beating industry. But it does, I mean, if you think about it, and I'm not being jingoistic or chauvinistic, but the number 2 in the world to Hollywood is Bollywood. And for a poor country like India, that is an incredible achievement. So in a lot of ways, what about the argument of the soft power sort of radiation that India is able to emit? It may never become a great industrial power. It may start, skip that stage to some extent. It may instead start to wield a much more creative and aesthetic and cultural influence on the world, a spiritual one. I know Kushal Mehra talks about a wounded civilization, frankly, healing itself after 1,000 years of, alien rule. We cannot get away from that India for 1,000 years was not ruled by its own people. It was ruled by, foreigners, and it's had these deep internal divisions, which it's been able to overcome. And also the fact is that another very powerful thing is that Indians, when they vote, I mean, it's the largest democracy in the world, but they seem to be voting in the national interest when it comes to the federal polls, and in their state or local interest when it comes to the state polls. So even the elector seems to have that very distinct national consciousness in what is most likely the most diverse population in the world. So, I mean, for some things, India has proven to be even more than what you would expect. I mean, I could be wrong. I mean, I don't even know the name of the Chinese film industry as an example. And, okay, there's K-pop and there's some Mandarin, Canto pop, but it's not got the gravitas or the, sort of like soft power of Bollywood as an example. So
true, but Bollywood in that sense is a condensate of everything that's gone wrong with India. It's the same every Bollywood movie pretty much, and not everyone, but say 95% of Bollywood movies are the same damn story. Boy falls in love with girl, there's some hiccups in between, and finally boy marries girl, or boy dies and girl dies. Okay. You have different actors, you have different songs, you have different costumes, you have different locations, but in the end, that's what it comes down to. I do not watch Bollywood. I very, very rarely watch Bollywood movies. I watch a lot of Iranian movies. I watch a lot of foreign movies generally. I watch sci-fi and horror, but I seldom watch Bollywood movies because they bore the daylights out of me. Look, there's always a market for tacky. Okay, just because tacky sells doesn't mean tacky is good. It's like saying, Trabant had a market in the Comic-Con zone. Yeah, because Trabant was the only other car other than, the Lada that you could get at that point of time, which didn't make the Trabant a competition for the Mercedes-Benz or the Citroën or the Fiat or whatever. So, yeah, great. I mean, Bollywood is fine. My issue is, why is it that all the path-breaking movies come from the West or come from Iran, or in terms of horror, they come from Korea, or they used to come from Japan at one point of time, right? Tell me the last path-breaking movie, the genre setter that came from India.
No, but then, I mean, Gully Boy was pretty good. Chapak, Kapar, what, Omkar? Oh, you didn't like
Gully
Gully
Boy
Boy?
was no. See, movies are mostly on the perspective and the stuff what we like, so we can't say it was good or not. What I think I agree with Mr. Abhijit on terms of Bollywood, whatever he says. I fairly agree with him.
Oh, okay, so I've been outnumbered here. So I'm not good. I think it's strange when you leave it to the Pakistani and the Persian to, basically elevate Bollywood above the rest. But anyway, but I guess that's soft power as well. But
you like Bollywood. That is great. It's just that I can't stand Bollywood. It's one of those things that always gets my goat, because the moment I hear, every time I go abroad, everybody's like, oh, so you like Bollywood? I'm like, yeah, no, I don't. And I used to always try to stay away from all the Indian ghettos, because, that's not why I came abroad. I didn't come abroad to then settle down in Little India or whatever. I'm a bit of a freak that way, but I'm not really stereotypical in that sense, I guess. But look, Bollywood is, well, there are some things that I would use to say that India can beat the world. For example, the moon mission on a budget. That's something we're very proud of. Frugal innovation, as it's called. I think the sense of patriotism that average Indians have. I'm not talking about elite pricks like me. I'm talking about the average Indian who breaks their back working, laying roads, selling vegetables, not being able to feed their families. They have such a deep fundamental faith in the idea of India. Wherever you go, you see that fundamental faith in the idea of India, right? So there's that great strength of the people and that belief in the notion of India in the people, which will always keep us strong in a way. I just think those people deserve so much better. And just like Bollywood, I think our policies like Bollywood are a lot of tamasha and very little substance. They're a betrayal of our people that deserve a lot better.
I think those are wonderful concluding lines. Omkar, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, to the question of path-breaking like cinemas which are coming on, I feel the web series now they're playing a quite good role because I think there is only potential over there. But as far as Bollywood is considered, I think they're not enriching all the new fresh talents which are trying to grow because there's a huge talent vested in India, but unfortunately they're not getting an opportunity. There's a reason that we are not able to come up with the path-breaking concepts, I feel.
I mean, it's related to our last podcast on nepotism and Bollywood, but which I do think stifles Bollywood. But I wanted to give you guys some concluding remarks because I think that we've had a really interesting discussion. But do you want to conclude or say anything that what is your takeaway to the viewer who's sort of like stuck with us through the entire journey? I'll start with you, Omkar, and then I'll let Abhijit have the final word.
Okay, so your question is, what is the conclusion?
Yeah, like what would you like the viewer to just take away with them, after seeing this video for like not a year now?
Okay. It's been great discussing and getting a different perspective from Mr. Abhijit. And what I would like to take away to the audience is that India is playing a good role as far as it is seen in terms of escalation going on between India and China. We are getting prepared in all the terms as possible, and hopefully it is not India of 1962, but it's going to be we can see the new India coming up. If any escalation happens, I think India will be quite good enough in standing off against China, and I also feel that the government has the guts and power to take a bold decisions now compared to the previous. And the way the Indian Army or Navy or Air Force is getting prepared is like they are showing that they are ready to face any opposition or standoff happens in cross border, maybe from Pakistan or the Nepal we have seen in the recent times, or in China. Strategically, we are playing a good role. What I feel, yes, I'm being optimist more. And in terms of superpower is considered, I think there is a need for rethinking the definition of superpower because the superpower what Western thinks is quite little bit different to what India is going to set. And there are certain factors that India will be leading to its own way of becoming a superpower nation one day. And yes, it's a great discussion. What I had got an opportunity of knowing a different perspective from Mr. Abhijit. And thank you for this organizing this session, Mr. Zach.
Thank you, Omkar. And Abhijit, if you like.
I'll end being just as pessimistic as I always was. India is by, for, and of mediocrity and a celebration of mediocrity. It is frustrating. It is deeply irritating. But it's still very, very lovable and very, very, very fascinating. And, it's just exasperating, but exasperating in a fun kind of way. It's like going on trying to make souffle and failing and finally getting it right. We never get it right, but hey, it's fun trying. I mean, all that chocolate is well used. Even if the souffle doesn't fluff up, there is chocolate to eat.
I like the dessert analogy. Thanks very much, Omkar, and of course, Abhijit. This was a great, great conversation. And I thank you, the viewer, for sticking with us as much as you did. And hopefully we'll see both of you again. And hopefully also we'll have some more podcasts. Thank you.